My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
The Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, the Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 12, Magic is Might. Elizabeth is with us.
Hi everyone.
This is another ministry-heavy episode.
But a more fun one.
Definitely not as emotionally draining as the last chapter.
Yeah, I hope last week you guys didn't leave super depressed after all the talk that we had.
I hope it was an entertaining yet also thought-provoking episode.
We can't guarantee that with this time.
At the very least, I hope it's entertaining. But we will start out with some shout-outs that we've had. And we'll start out with AV, who left a comment on Deathly Hallows Chapter 8, The Wedding.
Okay.
Very recent
Very
chapter.
recent.
AV says, "You were assuming that the wedding was well known. I would argue that perhaps it was not, and kept quiet for security reasons. There can also be spells so that the hires for the wedding don't know who it is for, or have the ability to pass info about it to others. Side point, I will be looking towards your runoff Harry Potter series of Babbity Rabbity."
Gotta love a Babbity Rabbity shout out.
I love the idea of we should do a spin-off podcast on Babbity Rabbity.
Yeah, just all the tales of the Beetle the Bard.
We might do an episode per Beetle of the Bard.
I think that'd be fun.
I think that would be really fun.
Yeah.
So we might do some of those bonus episodes once we're done.
In terms of the question, though, or comment, I guess I should say, it does make you wonder how often people in the Wizarding world get married. I would assume, given that we don't know the population of the Wizarding world, especially in that area, there can't be that many weddings, at least wizard weddings. I would imagine if it's to a muggle, that wedding wouldn't necessarily make the news.
It depends on a lot of factors, but to that point, the Wizarding world as a whole is smaller. So the idea of more wizards knowing about it, just because it's a smaller pocket of the population, is one thing I would think of. And the other thing I would think of is Bill and Fleur specifically are pretty popular people.
I mean, Fleur was famous. I mean, she's famous because of the Triwizard Tournament, and then her beauty is a nice factor. Yeah,
so Fleur, I think we're agreed, particularly famous.
Yeah.
And Bill, for all accounts, is a very popular, outgoing, sociable, smart, talented individual with a great job of curse breaking for Gringotts.
I'm sure he has a lot of friends.
I could imagine. Plus, I mean, the Weasley family as a whole.
Yeah.
But
no, I would imagine that this is a well-known event.
I get
it's
that
almost
vibe.
like the event of the year kind of a thing.
I mean, I get AV's point here, but that's kind of why we assume it was a known event.
Yeah.
Or at least not hard to find information if you really snooped.
Yeah.
I will grant AV this. There probably are spells so that the hires for the wedding either don't know who it is or are prevented from actually giving details on it.
Yeah.
That probably does exist.
I would assume that they would know whose wedding it is, but yeah, being able to speak about the wedding afterwards. I mean, it'd be interesting if that was just a general rule for their profession of you're not allowed to share the details of the wedding afterwards.
maybe.
Especially high-profile people kind of thing.
Yeah, there's probably something along those lines. So
It's just a magical NDA.
kind of. Well, I'd imagine like people at St. Mungo's, maybe for patient information.
Yeah.
Can't. It's like
Can't
an unspeakable, but for other professions.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There probably is some sort of magic. I guess my point on that was just, it seems like for such a secret event with so many secretive people.
There's so many people there.
There's so many people there.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
AV also leaves a comment on Deathly Hallows Chapter 9, A Place to Hide. And AV says on that comment, we have seen, seems similar to Hermione's bag before. Moody's trunk had a bunch of compartments, with the last being a whole room in which you had to step down into, which is true. Mm-hmm. But we have seen that enlarged space.
On several things.
Several things.
There's that. There's those camping tents. I loved your conversation with Jen about that. I fully agree. If I had this spell to use, not just a purse on my apartment, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'd have so much more room. It'd be great.
It would be wonderful. AV does have a question for us, though.
Okay.
Why didn't they also take the Death Eater's wands?
Because that would have been the smart thing to do.
AV says it would hamper them like taking a muggle's cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a great point. That is a valid option.
See, AV is a thinker. Harry is not. To be fair, they were stressed, I know, but yes, that would have been a smart thing to do.
We weren't either, because we didn't come up with that option either.
Well, I wasn't on that episode.
Oh, revisionist history from Elizabeth. No, it's a valid point.
It is. I don't know why they didn't think of it. It would have been really nice to have spare wands, just in case.
Or just destroy the wands.
Yeah.
Like, make them... I get that they could go get alternate wands.
Yeah.
That's fine. But at least for the time being...
It certainly hampers them for a while.
Yep. And so that's a solid third potential option.
Yeah, I like it.
Kill them, modify their memories, or just destroy their wands.
Yeah.
Or take their wands. Either way. Our next comment comes from DGMZ12.
Okay.
This comment was left on our Instagram.
Okay.
And they say, Patronuses definitely have a character limit, like early text messaging. This is very clearly in reference to a conversation Jen and I had recently, where we wondered if these messages, if like, do they have a limit? Does the Patronus fade?
They speak in very short sentences.
Very quick and to the point.
Uh-huh.
So I wonder if the Patronus has like an energy limit where it has a stop.
Your guys' conversation was reminding me of whenever I talk to Jen and I text her, the two of us just send each other novels. So we would not communicate with Patronus very well. It'd be like, okay, this is the first of like 10 thread like Patronus things.
That poor Patronus has to go back and forth so many times. Thank you for all of those comments. We really appreciate all the interaction. You can interact with us by leaving a comment on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, all of those things. You can find our socials at Hogwarts a Pod. And if you leave a comment or you leave a thought, we'll try to shout you out on the podcast and discuss and debate and have those discussions surrounding your ideas. And we really appreciate all that interaction. It really helps make the episode a little bit well-rounded and more direct to you, the listener. So we really, really appreciate that. Also, we have polls on Spotify. Please participate in those. We love seeing those results. Just spread the podcast around.
Yeah.
Get our voices out into the world. I think we've been heard in about 146 different countries.
Seriously?
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
That's insane.
That's mind-blowing to me. So if you're listening to this in another country, not the United States of America.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm a big traveler, so it means a lot to me. And I know I had interactions in Belgium, of all places, where the podcast is doing quite well. So we really appreciate all of those in Belgium, whether it's be Bruges or Brussels or Antwerp or anywhere else in Belgium. We really, really appreciate everyone listening around the world.
It is cool to think that while the Wizarding World's population might be small within the Muggle world, this real world, the Wizarding World fandom is quite large.
Yeah,
spreads
it's
everywhere.
crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I was blown away by all of the Harry Potter shops and stores
Yeah.
and merchandise in Belgium. It was really cool to see. But we have a chapter to discuss.
We have more thoughts.
Magic is Might is the chapter title. And we have scenes in Grimmauld Place, and we have scenes at the Ministry of Magic itself. Interesting. So, we start by Death Eaters outside taking a particular interest in number 12 Grimmauld Place.
I love that the fact that this little bit is told from the perspective of the Muggles. And they're just like, yeah, we've always noticed that it's number 11 is next to number 13. What a quirk. Funny. And now there's weird people outside staring at it for hours on end every single day. Why? Like,
you know what observation hits me the hardest? What are they doing in these long cloaks in all of this heat?
I would die.
Which is such a throwaway observation, but Elizabeth, what do they do in those long cloaks in the middle of all this heat?
Do you think they watch the birds?
Do they have magically air-conditioned cloaks?
I hope so.
Is there somehow a breeze?
They're going to die from heat stroke, and then Voldemort's going to be like, I got to find some new Death Eaters to put on guard.
Are they constantly cooling cloaks? How about that for alliteration? Constantly cooling cloaks. Can you say that 3 times fast?
Nice.
But,
I'm also just wondering about entertainment-wise. Like, I know they have to stare at the step, but it's not like they have phones to be playing games on. It's like most boring game of I Spy ever.
What if you get paired with a Death Eater you don't like?
Oh, God. That one coworker who either won't shut up or is just in this really uncomfortable silence. I don't know which would be worse. Well, they're out there, especially on September 1st. There's 6 of them out there on that day.
Yeah, September 1st seems to be a particularly active Death Eater day. Mm-hmm. And the assumption is that it's the day that the students would be leaving on the Hogwarts Express.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a second. But Harry pops in, quite literally. He apparates on the front step under the invisibility cloak and might have almost been noticed, because one of the Death Eaters is like, I saw something, I know I did.
Yeah, they like start forward and then,
Yep.
Couldn't do it.
And Harry's like, oh, I think my elbow might have slipped under the invisibility cloak, because they're taller now. They're not as...
Which also makes you wonder, like, how close are they to the actual house to be staring? Because if it was... I guess I always just pictured it as, like, across the street. I mean, if
it says in the courtyard. They seem to be gathering in the courtyard, right?
Okay, but even
like
still...
a square?
I'm just picturing, like, a row of houses on one side and then a street, and the other side of the street is, like, the courtyard. But if they're just, like, sitting on a bench or something and just staring and just staring and staring,
mm-hmm.
I would think that your eyes would, like, imagine things even if they aren't there. And just, like, your mind played tricks on you. So the idea of seeing a little tiny flash of an elbow, like, I don't know.
Could be a glint of sunlight on
it could be anything.
Well, Harry goes through the usual motion now of having the tongue roll back and having to say, no, I didn't kill you, and the ghost Dumbledore explodes into a dust storm.
Mm-hmm.
And then he walks into a very clean... Grimmauld Place.
It's pretty cozy.
Creature has begun cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
He's begun cooking. He's even cleaned himself up.
I know. Which in itself is like, whoa.
Which begs the question, do you think Creature gets upset every time this ghost of dust blows up and he's like, now I gotta dust again? And I
don't know. I kind of get the impression that it blows up and then it just like regathers itself for the next time. But I was more wondering is this the way Grimmauld Place looked when the Blacks were living there, with Creature being like, clean and happy.
It seems like it's lived in, because it's like he's making dinner at this point in time, so he's got the fire going in the fireplace. Like, it looks like a lived-in place.
And he's also very quick to be like, okay, I'm going to put things where they belong. Like the invisibility cloak, he hangs up on the pegs on the wall. Right. And it's like, let me take this off for you, and go wash your hands, Mr. Potter, and like all that stuff. It's like...
Well, you mentioned taking the cloak from Harry and putting it up on a thing. You know what Creature has put on? He's put on
something.
He's put on the locket.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Cool.
I know we had debates a little while ago.
Yeah, you and Jen were talking about what counts as clothing.
Yep.
I have a
And
thought.
Harry giving a potential article of clothing as a gift to Creature is a risky move.
Yes. I had a thought that my impression is clothing is anything that is made out of cloth. So if it was a scarf or a hat or like a pocket handkerchief or anything like that, if it's made out of cloth, it counts as clothes. If it is not made out of cloth, like jewelry or watches, a chain like that, then it is an
Shoe?
accessory.
Shoe is a no-go?
A shoe could be made out of cloth.
So any leather-based product? No? Like a jacket, but it's out of leather?
Yeah, leather would still count as like a cloth, like a material to make it out of. Yeah. If it's a material to make like out of like cloth or things that are usually used for it, you're trying to poke holes in my logic
Absolutely
here.
I am.
I just think anything that is more jewelry based, that kind of stuff would be considered an accessory. And therefore acceptable. But I do like the point of, I mean, he could have taken this and used it as an excuse to twist the logic and be like, I'm free. But I think just the fact that it was Regulus's makes him be like, I'm so honored that I guess I'll trust you guys and like help you out since you gave old Creature a little treat. This is why you treat house elves nicely.
I can understand if you don't count the locket as clothing because it's generally considered an accessory, even if it's metallic. That being said,
it was a big risk.
It's still a really big risk because the gray area does exist.
Yeah.
So, I won't fight you too hard on is it clothing, is it not, but it's too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Either way. Anyway, we do learn, as Harry brings in another prophet. Mm-hmm. The prophet's given us all kinds of info lately.
I mean, thank God for that, though, because otherwise, how are you supposed to keep up on the world if you're just holed away in Grimmauld Place?
Mm-hmm. So this Daily Prophet brings news that Severus Snape, is the new headmaster at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Mm-hmm. It also brings other news.
Not good news.
Not good news. The recently open Muggle Studies teacher, because clearly that teacher resigned.
Permanently from life.
Yep. That new teacher is Alecto Caro.
And we know that name.
We know that name. We also know the other name. The Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, taking over for Snape, as Snape has now got promoted, is Amicus
The
Caro.
brother of Alecto.
They are siblings. They are twin siblings. They are also Death Eaters. So, after reading this information, Hermione says, Merlin's pants!
Everyone's out there. She is so smart, though. Like, let's just think about this for a second. Like, within seconds of hearing this news, she runs off and she grabs the portrait of Phineas Nigellus. Because she knows if Snape is in the headmaster's office, who else could go into the headmaster's office? And who else was a Slytherin headmaster whose loyalties would probably be towards a Slytherin headmaster? Like, maybe we shouldn't have a spy in our secret hideout when we are the most wanted people in the country.
It's certainly a portrait you might not be able to trust.
Yes. So she's so smart with
So she grabs
running
it,
towards it.
she stuffs it in her tiny little handbag, which is just an amazing thing to probably witness in
Imagine
person.
the next time he like comes into his portrait, he's like, this is not what I'm used to.
Why?
I finally have a new view after however long I've been up on that wall.
And it is a random sock. And so, while Hermione is going to get the portrait, Ron and Harry are like, wow, she must be really upset. She just ran off like crazy and said Merlin's pants. But they discuss the fact that they're not on the Hogwarts Express. They're not arriving at Hogwarts this evening. They're not at a great feast.
There's a whole debate, too, about, like, with Snape in charge, what will the other professors do? And there was a thought, well, they'll all resign in protest. And the argument against it was, no, they'll try to stay because they'll recognize we have to protect the kids. If there are more openings, that just leads a greater risk of Voldemort appointing Death Eaters. Mm-hmm. And we would like Hogwarts to be as free of Death Eaters as we possibly can.
Okay, Miss Teacher. Mm-hmm. What do you think that teacher's lounge is like?
God, I'd avoid it like the plague.
Because McGonagall is not a woman to be trifling with.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Flitwick and Sprout are proud individuals. Mm-hmm. So I imagine they must have some way of communicating
I'm sure
real
there's some
thoughts.
secret teacher rebellion going on.
Maybe. That cannot be a super comfortable... I can't imagine. Snape shows up and McGonagall's just like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
Like, there must be some conversation being had there.
There's a lot of tension there. I mean, you think you know someone, and then they kill your boss, and then they come back and they become your boss when it was the job you were supposed to get.
Yeah.
A little awkward.
A little bit. A little bit.
How was your summer?
There was a lot going on in that Hogwarts teacher's lounge that first day.
I will say, I'm sure Snape's opening speech, if he ever even gave one, was not as memorable as Dumbledore's first opening speech that we saw back in book 1.
Maybe he had packets that he gave all of the students and all the teachers, and he's just standing up at the podium and going, please turn to page number 294.
I could see him more being like, you're all idiots. I will try to teach you things, but you won't learn them because you're all idiots. Except for you, Slytherins, you're fantastic. 100 points to Slytherin. Let's just give him the house cup now.
In all seriousness, I think Snape would have been quite understated and very serious. I think he would have been short and to the point. I think he would have been very, you are here to learn. Mm-hmm. I expect you to be behaving. Mm-hmm. If not, there will be consequences.
And hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You don't want to see those consequences this year.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty much all he would have to say, honestly. Mm-hmm. And
then Filch on the side being like, yes! Punishments! Will you let me chain them to the wall?
Yeah, because a squib is in great standing. But I would assume that the row of teachers at the head of the Great Hall that's probably a frosty...
Very much so.
Frosty environment.
Yeah.
We get told that Harry, while he was gone and outside of Grimmauld Place, he just came back from sitting outside the entrance to the Ministry of Magic for 7 hours. 7 hours he sat there and staked it out. And he said there was no sign of Umbridge. However, Arthur looks okay. He saw Arthur, looks fine, looks good. They've all agreed that they can't actually... It's too risky to go up and talk to Arthur.
Right.
But it's just good to know that he's there, going to work, as normal. Life is going on as normal as it can possibly be under the circumstances.
Ron said he thinks the reason why they haven't seen Umbridge is that she thinks herself too important, and she probably uses the flu network to get to work instead, which makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a very logical conclusion. Ultimately, what they're doing is they're planning on breaking in to the Ministry of Magic.
I love this. I love this so much, especially because it's like she takes us to the almost end of this whole stakeout bit. If it was just the start of the whole stakeout and seeing them do the whole process of weeks upon end looking and staring at the ministry, like, okay, great. But like the fact that this is them with a purpose and doing research and the work in order to make this successful. Like, this is one of the few times where they're able to be prepared for the task on hand because they know ahead of time what's coming. I love it.
Okay, I have a couple of things.
Okay.
One, as far as a book goes and me reading it for entertainment value, I love this idea. Great idea. Great move to include this kind of thing. It's like it would be a cool James Bond, Ocean's 11 type scenario of like...
You could just imagine the fun music.
Yeah, we're doing this covert mission where we're breaking into this super secret, super dangerous area. Whatever. It's awesome. That being said, Couldn't you just find a way to find Umbridge outside of the Ministry? Do you have to break into the Ministry? There's no way to track like where she might actually reside.
I think the assumption would be her guard would be down the most at work.
She was walking through Diagon Alley, which is how she came upon the locket in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not like she's hiding.
But I guess, like, if you want to be able to plan for something, you want a consistent thing to plan for, and her consistent thing is going to work.
That's fair. There are a couple of details here. They've been staking out the Ministry of Magic for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And given that they've been staking the Ministry of Magic out for 4 weeks, naturally Ron forgets a major important detail.
Poor Ron.
That the maintenance people wear the same uniform.
Yeah, these navy blue robes.
The navy blue robes, which Hermione freaks out and is like, are you kidding me with this? This is important. We need to know what uniforms the maintenance people wear.
I love Ron's just like, well, yeah, that's what they do. He's like, you can't make assumptions that we know everything that you know. Like, we did not grow up with a father who works in the ministry.
Please communicate.
Yes. They do have a lot of information, though.
Wait, before we get to the information, can we just talk about for a second, speaking of Hermione, you're okay with a plan to break into the Ministry of Magic. You won't let poor Harry go visit his parents' graves in Godric's Hollow.
It's
but
dangerous.
the Ministry of Magic.
But we at least know there's a Horcrux there. We gotta follow our strongest lead.
You are the most wanted person in the country.
That's what makes it so much like James Bond.
It is. But you're cool with that and not spending like a day or two to go to Godric's Hollow?
I mean, I will agree with you. A day or two at Godric's Hollow doesn't seem like the worst idea in the world, but I think there is still the fear of if we go to Godric's Hollow, that's... You know those books where it's like choose your own adventure?
Yes.
I feel like there's the go to Godric's Hollow option or go to the Ministry, and the Godric's Hollow could be a like dead end after a page or two, or it could be this whole other can of worms. And if we know there's the locket at the Ministry, it is a for sure Horcrux.
Here's the thing.
Go that route. Here's
the thing. Let's say there's the same amount of Death Eaters watching Godric's Hollow as Grimmauld Place. 2 to roughly 6, which I feel like is a fair estimation. You're talking about going into a beehive of potential issues.
Yeah.
That's better than just spending a day in Godric's Hollow?
Well, it's the last place they'd expect him to be, I suppose, other than Hogwarts.
That's a dangerous
It's a risk. It is a big risk. But I think that's why Hermione's like, we have to know every single detail. This is dangerous.
Some of those details include the no apparition inside of the Ministry of Magic.
In or out of it, yeah.
Yep, they have eliminated that as an option. Only senior members are allowed to connect homes to the Flu network. And Umbridge's office is on level 1. How do they find all this stuff out? By overhearing conversations that are happening over the 4 weeks of people heading in and out of the Ministry.
Which honestly is like a fairly decent amount of information for just that.
It's a good amount.
Just hear tidbits of a conversation.
Well, the real key piece of information is where exactly Umbridge's office is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
otherwise, oh gosh. There's also the fact that you have to get tokens now to get into the building. So if they had tried it without that.
You know what I'm thinking of? You know what we didn't hear? What their plan is to do with Umbridge should they find her. Do you think she just stored this locket in her desk drawer?
Well,
why wouldn't this be at her home anyway?
I think you are seeing the flaw in their plan, which is we haven't planned beyond how to break into the Ministry. Once we're inside the Ministry, what are we going to do? Which, as we'll see in a little bit, might have required a little bit more foresight.
Fair enough. So there are arguments amongst the trio about who exactly should go on this mission.
Yeah, I love their arguments.
And here's the essential breakdown. Hermione shouldn't go because she has recently been named as a wanted person for not checking in to the Muggle-born registration.
Yeah.
Kind of a problem. Ron shouldn't go because he should be home with Spattergoit right now. And if he is caught, I mean, that sounds
His whole family will be at risk if that happens.
Right. That sounds very silly, but obviously that puts a lot of people in bigger danger. Mm-hmm. And Harry happens to have a 10,000 galleon bounty on his head.
Yeah, that's one way to gather attention.
Life changing. Do you think Voldy just took up a collection amongst the Death Eaters?
Well, he owns the ministry. He could just raid.
Do you think he's like panhandling, like Malfoy? Where's your bank? Hit me up. Come on. You got to sell some possessions? I don't care. Hit me up.
No, I think they're threatening the goblins and, taking money out of Gringotts.
Ooh, that's a dangerous game to play. You can't threaten those goblins about
that are promising
that's a dangerous game.
Future freedom, maybe, if they join their team.
I think that might be. But I think Voldy is smart enough to be like, let's fight one war at a time.
Maybe it's just we'll put the number out, make it big enough to make it be serious, and then we'll worry about money.
See what
if
happens.
it actually happens.
Fair enough.
Or and then you come up with Harry, and then we kill you and Harry, and then I don't have to pay anybody.
I just like the idea of Voldy shaking down Raoul and being like, I know you got it. Shake out your robe pocket. Let's see what we got. Anyway, so after this discussion, Harry gets up from the table because his scar is hurting, and he doesn't want the nagging of Hermione, and he doesn't want to worry her on, so he goes to the bathroom and has a moment where he dives into Voldy's actions, and Voldy is searching for Gregorovitch. And he comes upon a house that looks like a gingerbread house, I think is what he described it as. Yeah,
the woman speaks German when he opens the door. Or she opens the door, I should say.
Yep. And he's asking about Gregorovitch. This is where... See, this is what I'm saying. Voldy's able to find out where Gregorovitch lived or is living in a foreign country. But they can't find out where Umbridge resides? Come on. Anyway, whatever.
You don't want to go to Umbridge's house. That place is probably terrifying.
I'm sure it is. Cats everywhere. Which you would love! Anyway. Or maybe it's not cats everywhere. Maybe it's just the dishes of the cats.
Ugh.
Anyway, getting sidetracked by cats. The ultimate result of this is she says that Gregorovitch used to live here, does not live here currently. This results in a flash of green light as she tries to protect her two children from this monster entering her home.
Yeah.
And it doesn't explicitly say, but I assume the implication is that he killed the family.
Side note, the fact that she's protecting her kids, isn't this the same as Lily protecting Harry?
I had the same thought. And the only counter I can have to such a thing is, one, we don't know that she's actually particularly magical. This could just
the fact that she knows about Gregorovitch would make me assume so.
Gregorovitch should just be a name. It doesn't have to be... She doesn't have to know he's a wand maker.
I don't know.
It doesn't have
to be...
The
way she looked at Voldemort made me think, she knows who this is.
This is a man without a nose and red eyes. Okay. Elizabeth. This is a horrifying looking individual.
Fair enough.
Come on. So, to answer your question, I don't know that she's magical and then can thus place that magical protection or have that magical protection applied. I don't know. It might just be she might not have been able to get between Voldy and the kids. There's a whole bunch of
questions.
So, and it's left purposefully vague. It's just a flash of green light.
Yeah.
We don't get confirmation on anything, so we don't really know. But we do know that Harry was apparently screaming because Hermione pounds on the door and scolds him for allowing Voldy's thoughts and feelings to creep into Harry. And Harry fires back that he doesn't like the connection. Do you think he likes seeing Voldy be angry and vengeful and full of hate and killing? Do you think he wants to witness murder after murder after murder?
But I do like his point, though, even if Dumbledore once upon a time told him to close his mind. It's like, listen, this is my choice. I want to know what he's up to because I can use that information to better inform myself of what to do.
Well, now he has the knowledge that it very, very, very much can be used against him.
Yeah.
I truthfully do not think Harry would fall for that trap again.
No, I don't think so either.
It's hard because let's say Voldy tries to implant another image with like Arthur or Molly or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think he would take better steps to make sure. Yeah.
Well, Hermione uses Dumbledore as I feel like what she has is like a trump card of sorts of like,
He
Dumbledore
said,
told
don't
you,
do that.
If he told you not to do it, then you shouldn't do it. And Harry responds with, forget Dumbledore. Mm-hmm. Forget him.
I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yep. And that's a powerful statement. And I think it's bred from a lot of the negative things he's been hearing from Albus. Mm-hmm. I would wonder if he hadn't been hearing all these negative things about Albus, if he'd still feel this way.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question.
But I think also there's a little bit of acknowledgement of like, Dumbledore knows plans don't always stay exactly the same way we once planned them. So you have to improvise. And if this can help us do that, then let's go for it. Can I mention one tiny little thing? Because I think it's really sweet. That Harry is sleeping in Sirius's room. I think that's really, really cute that he's doing that.
That's interesting that he's now adopted that as his room. Mm-hmm. And he spends time, yes, going over the plan, because they've decided as a group that tomorrow will be the day.
Yeah.
So they've gone over the plan. So he does go over the plan, but he also takes some time and looks at the picture of the Marauders.
Mm-hmm. That just makes me happy to think of him in his godfather's room.
So we get the next day, and we get the setup for this Ministry of Magic excursion. And the setup is generally Polyjuice Potion is involved. Mm-hmm. The invisibility cloak is an essential key piece to this for obvious reasons. Each individual will get a supply of decoy detonators, puking pastules, nosebleed nougat, and extendable ears.
Yeah, I bet Fred and George never thought that their vomiting treats would be used in this way.
I keep thinking this is just a James Bond. And like Fred and George are Q here. And, they're just going on a mission. They have their gadgets, and they're ready to go. Uh-huh. They end up basing themselves in a small alleyway near an empty, vacated theater. Mm-hmm. And here's what essentially happens. The first person they target is Mephelda Hopkirk, an assistant in the improper use of magic office. They end up stunning her.
And then stealing some of her coins.
Yeah, they bring her into the abandoned theater, and they obviously have the Polyjuice Potion. They change Hermione into some of the similar clothing. They take her identification, the coins that she uses to get into the Ministry, because that's how it's done now. Mm-hmm. Then that's Mephelda Hopkirk and Hermione. Then they end up trick, bully,
pester,
force puking pastules on Reg Cattermole, who is a maintenance wizard at the Ministry of Magic.
Just that whole conversation was so funny to me. She was like, "Oh, how are you today?" He's like, "Oh, not so great." She's like, "Well, have a sweet." And it's just like, okay. Shove it under his nose.
He was trying to tell Hermione why he was having a bad day, and she just kept ignoring him.
To be fair, they're on a time limit, but come on.
It's a mistake, which we'll find out about later.
Yeah. They said it was a little weird that this man isn't wearing his normal navy blue robes.
Yeah, he had a briefcase or a bag with him that had his work clothes in it, so they were able to get that before he disapparated.
I mean, he was crawling on the floor, puking, be like, "I have to go. I have to get in." It's just like, you can't. You're vomiting.
Go to St. Mungo's. So he eventually apparates away.
Which, speaking of...
disapparates.
What do you think St. Mungo's thinks of the twins' creations with all these snack boxes? Like, do you think they'd recognize this as like, oh yeah, they just didn't eat the other end of it to stop vomiting?
I'm sure that's what the assumption is, and I'm sure they probably have a quick fix for it.
Do you think it's more amusement or annoyance? And we're like,
probably annoyance. If I know healthcare professionals, as I do,
yeah,
it's probably annoyance more than anything, because it's something that they now have to deal with that won't take very much of their effort, but it still takes effort to do.
Yeah.
And they'll probably be annoyed by it. Be like, oh, I have to deal with this? Really? All right. But yeah, so that's Reg Cattermole, who's a maintenance wizard. And then the third target, who we eventually come to know as Runcorn, was given some nosebleed nougat and eventually succumbs as well.
And Runcorn is described as a very tall man, over 6 foot tall, with a beard, which immediately made me think that Harry has become you.
So we got Hermione as Mafalda, we get Ron as Reg, and we get Harry as Runcorn. Do you think it would have been better, because they have this minor argument, do you think it would have been better to just stun them all instead of leaving a potential question mark with the pastilles and the nougat?
I don't know. I do think it's having 3 people stunned does run the risk of someone stumbling upon them and being like, what's going on here? One person being stunned could be more excusable as like, well, they were mugged or like they passed out for some reason. But sending them home with nosebleeds that popped up out of nowhere and vomiting to that degree. And I've always gotten the sense with the sweets that it's like extreme nosebleed, extreme puking, and not just like a little like bleh, like kind of thing.
Right.
That'd be suspicious. If they're not aware of the treats, because there is that slight chance that they're not purchasers of such things.
Convincing grown men.
Have a piece of candy.
Right? Isn't that a little weird?
Oh.
I think you're better off just stunning
Maybe
them
if
all.
you were like, have a breath mint. This will help with your...
I think you're better off just stunning them all. Personally. I think just do it.
I do think, though, if they woke up and then they were like, this was weird, and they went and reported it to somebody, they might be punished. There would be more of an inquiry as to, like, how this happened, and follow-up questions are always tricky.
Well, you're not... I mean, I get that you're incapacitating them because they can't stop puking and they can't stop the nosebleed. Mm-hmm. So that's incapacitation to a point. Mm-hmm. But it's easily reversible.
Yeah.
And they themselves... I mean, the point of these is that the student then goes to the hospital and gets out of class...
Yeah.
Goes to the hospital wing, takes the...
And then stays out of class.
I
mean, if we have people who are like, oh, I get a day off from work, heck yeah. Like,
so you're temporary... The point is you're temporarily incapacitating them.
Yeah, but to be fair, if it's Polyjuice Potion, we only have an hour to deal with anyway. So...
Can they deal with it in an hour? That's still a
that's
gamble.
the time limit that they have in general. Even if like, they come back... It's going to wear off very quickly, so...
It's a gamble.
Yeah.
It's still a gamble. Anyway, they find out how exactly you have to get into the Ministry of Magic now. You can't apparate in, Flu Network's limited. How do you get into the Ministry of Magic? You now have to flush yourself in.
Yeah, stand in a toilet and flush yourself down into the Ministry.
So let's talk about flushing yourself in the toilet.
Who do you thought got this idea?
Well, so here's the thing. There's 2 ways to look at this.
Uh-huh.
There's 3 ways to look at this. Okay? There are Death Eaters running this, and they want to make you look like a fool. And they're going to make you stand in a toilet and flush yourself in to degrade yourself to step into their environment.
That's a very valid thought.
Number 2, their bathrooms. Mm-hmm. To prevent muggles from accidentally doing this, you have to make it in something that you know for a fact they're not going to do. No random human is going to stand in a toilet and flush it. So to ensure safety, privacy, and the sanctity of the Ministry of Magic, make them do something absurd that no normal human being is going to be like, yeah, this is a smart idea.
Yeah.
Or 3, both.
I could also see a fourth option of
Wow, way to one-up me.
which clearly doesn't work though, of if the water could wash away disguises and stuff, of having to flush yourself in and like
Oh, sure.
like that kind of thing. But clearly that's not the case because Polyjuice Potion still stays as Polyjuice
Wouldn't that be a
Potion.
curveball? Oh,
That'd be so bad.
That'd be a disaster.
That'd be so bad.
Now, we have flushed ourselves down the toilet. And now we are inside the Ministry of Magic.
Guess what? Doesn't look like it used to.
Nope, because this Ministry of Magic is so much better than what Fudge and Rufus ran. Instead of a gold fountain, we get a black stone statue. This black stone statue is a witch and wizard on thrones. The words "magic is might" is on the statue. And the thrones happen to be on muggles, who are carved as ugly and stupid.
And naked. And not just that, it's every age and every
they're
gender.
children.
Yeah, there's like naked
It's not
children.
just adults.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's children.
Yeah.
For all those who thought just a witch and wizard standing above a centaur and above a house elf was bad, what is this?
Well, the point is that anything can always get so much worse. Like there is no, like the bar can always be lowered.
This is disgusting.
Yeah.
And horrifying and terrifying.
Yeah.
The message that's being sent
I mean,
here,
just imagine any muggle-born being brought in for their interrogations, seeing that, and it's like, this is what they think of me. I'm not worthy of the magic that I possess. They see me as, like, less than an animal, even.
Hermione says the words, muggles,
Yeah.
in their proper place.
Yeah.
And I actually got to see this prop. For anyone who's actually been to the Warner Brothers Studios tour in London, they obviously have many, 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 many movie props. This is one of them, the Blackstone statue from the movie. Magic is might, throne, bunch of muggles.
Yeah.
It's imposing, and it's not a fun image, nor is it supposed to be. If you didn't get the idea that the Voldy administration
Not great.
is not good and does not have your best interests at heart,
Yeah.
this statue is a very clear identifier of not good. May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you were a centaur, or you were a house elf, or you were the other beings represented on the previous gold fountain, you were upset that you were smaller than witches or wizards. Are you more upset or less upset that you're not even included at all?
I don't know.
You can't be upset that they're not sitting on a throne on top of you. Like, that's great. But now you're not even a factor at all in any way, shape, or form.
I don't know if the house elves would... I mean, they would probably identify with the muggles in the sense of, like, we're being used. But at the same time, most of the house elves accept their slavery. It's just ones like Dobby who seem to see there's a real problem here. The centaurs would definitely have an issue with
not being acknowledged at all.
not being acknowledged. But I think there might also be... I think they'd have dual thoughts of this is disgusting, but also like, well, let the humans
Figure it out.
implode, and then centaurs can just live their happy little lives. Like that's to some degrees, like some humans, they see them that way. I'm sure they see like umbrage in that sense of you're disgusting. And
can I just, I what you said was interesting, and I promised I wouldn't do this because the chapter's over and we're past it. But what you just said triggered me.
go on.
You could apply the same issue I have with Harry, Dumbledore, and the Order treating the Ministry as the Centaurs. You're
Of watching it implode.
Yeah, you're sitting on the sideline being like, oh, it's a human problem. Let the humans figure out their problem. And you're not picking a side. Is that a good idea? Because eventually one is going to beat the other and they might come for you next.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's a good idea. I'm just saying. Centaurs, maybe you should pick a side here. Just saying. Anyway.
In any case, it's a much darker...
It's dark. It's dark. It sends a dark tone. It sends a very clear message. So, they try to get on point. They try to get to where they need to go. So they're going towards the elevators. And as they're getting near one, Yaxley comes and yells out for Cattermole.
Which, of course, Ryan's like, oh, wait, that's me.
Yeah. So, apparently, his office is raining. It's raining.
I love that that's a problem.
It's raining in his office, and he's called for maintenance to help him.
Just imagine, though, like, the reality of that. Of if it's just rain. Like, just imagine the sprinklers just constantly going, and all your papers are getting flooded, and just, like...
Yep.
Like, it's so funny to me. Not funny to him, though.
Not funny to him. So, we do get this interesting note, though. Harry sees Yaxley and notes that he, this Death Eater, witnessed Albus's death and refers to Yaxley and describes him as having a brutish face. Very similar to the description that was the Death Eater on the astronomy tower that night. Who we don't get any name, we don't get any other description. It was Yaxley. I think we could safely say it was Yaxley.
Probably.
And by the way, when we have those discussions, I tried to Google. Like,
yeah, you couldn't find it.
And I couldn't find it.
Yeah,
like who that
I
other
remember
Death Eater was. It was nowhere.
Yeah.
Unless I just randomly missed it somehow. But I think this very clearly identifies Yaxley as the other person on the astronomy tower with the Caros and Greyback.
I would think so. It actually does bring interesting information, though, which explains why Ron was not dressed in the navy robes of the maintenance men.
Why Reg?
Yeah, why Reg wasn't. He said his wife was being interrogated, and he told him, next time marry a pureblood. But he was basically threatening him, like, if you want your wife to not be arrested, then maybe you should go try to deal with the office of the head of magical law enforcement.
He doesn't even say she'd be let go.
No, he's just like, if you want slightly better outcome,
right?
Let's go stop that.
If you want a slightly better chance of a potential good outcome,
yeah,
better help me.
Yeah.
So he doesn't promise she'd be freed.
Yeah.
He says mostly negative, threatening things to Reg its entire interaction.
And then he's really nice to Harry.
Well, and then he's like nodding and wanting approval from Runcorn.
Yeah.
Which gives you an idea of who Runcorn is. Also, you get an idea of who Runcorn is because when this whole scene begins, Harry's standing at the beginning of the flush pipe.
Yeah.
They get flushed right into him because Harry's staring at this very different ministry.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, come on, move. What are you doing? And then they realize who it is. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So there is that.
So what this means, though, is now Ron is no longer able to focus on the task at hand. He has to go stop the rain, which he has no idea how to do.
In this interaction with Yaxley and the trio, we do learn that Yaxley is now the head of magical law enforcement. So you now have a high-ranking Death Eater in charge of law enforcement. Interesting. Yaxley gives Reg/Ron an hour to sort it out, or his wife is going to be in more trouble. Ron struggles with how to fix the office. Hermione offers Finite Incantatem, if it's a curse or a hex. If it's an atmospheric charm gone wrong, that's going to be way more complicated, and you should at least stall by using Impervious on all of Yaxley's possessions.
I like they're whispering this in the elevator. And while that conversation is going on, there was some other wizard who complimented Harry for accusing Dirk Cresswell from Goblin Liaison of falsifying his family tree. And he was like, oh, great, I'm going to get his job now, since clearly, like, he won't be able to stay in it for very long. And Harry's very clearly getting the kind of impression of what man he is impersonating here. We can talk more about Dirk in the spoilers. There's a little bit more information about him.
So Hermione decides, okay, you know what? Maybe Ron's a little out of his depth here with a potential atmospheric charm gone wrong. I'm going to go help Ron. Mm-hmm. But as she makes that decision, the elevator clings down to level 1, doors open, and you get a wonderful cloaked individual and a small toad-like woman with a bow. They're greeted by Umbridge, and I'm assuming Pius is the well-cloaked, long-haired individual, because they're at the level that houses the Minister of Magic and assorted assistants and such and such. Mm-hmm. So we end another chapter, back-to-back chapters, with
Umbridge,
a small toad-like woman with a bow. And that's how we end. So with that, we will pause here and take a little break. We will be back with the spoiler section. Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, so we're back with the spoiler section of Chapter 12, Magic is Might. We're going to kick off the spoiler section with some Dirk Cresswell talk.
Yeah, so this is not the last that we see of Dirk Cresswell. We meet him again later on when everybody is on the run and camping. He joins up with Dean and a goblin, and it's the three of them from which Harry, Ron, and Hermione hear that the Sword of Gryffindor was a fake that is in the vault, which is, of course, vital information for them to have later on. But in terms of a little bit of information about him, like, he's actually fairly interesting. He was part of the Slug Club. He was known for being so fluent in gobbledygook, which makes sense as to why he became the head of the Goblin Liaison Office. This whole situation right now, he attempted to use the forged family tree in order to claim wizarding heritage, but Runcorn discovered him, which is why he is on the run and then eventually caught and murdered by those snatchers. So, though his time is short in the books, crucial to the plot.
Such an interesting background for such a limited character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's just a shame that such a obviously qualified and important man had to go on the run.
Going back to one of my previous debate topics, if Dirk Cresswell can be in the Slug Club, why can't Percy?
Percy doesn't know gobbledygook, does he? But that's Dirk. So not the last we see of him, obviously. The other biggest one, I think, from this chapter was Hermione's intelligence with grabbing the Phineas Nigellus portrait, which, of course, her fear is that he's going to spy on them for Snape. Spoiler alert, he does exactly that, but it's not in the way that they think. It's more for the benefit of them, because the information Snape is getting is also coming from Dumbledore. Of, you want to keep this like plan succeeding, then here's what you got to do.
Whoa. We're talking about spoiler alert for Phineas being a spy for real. Uh-huh. And then Snape. Double spoiler alert that Snape's good. What?
It does make you wonder, though, like, I mean, the only way Snape is able to get the Sword of Gryffindor to the trio is because Phineas Nigellus hears when Hermione is like closing up her purse, that they're near some woods, and that's the only way that they were like, okay, we got a location. Go now, do it. Like, what would they have done if they hadn't thought about grabbing the portrait?
Well, that's true.
I guess there was the whole idea of the sword was supposed to pass to him through the will. But that's also putting a lot of trust in the government to actually give a child a sword.
That was never going to happen. The issue that I'm thinking of is if they didn't grab the portrait, then they would be alerted. Snape would be alerted to the fact that, oh, wait, Grimmauld Place is now off the potential places for them to be. Like, now they're on the run somewhere. Yeah. Which I guess they're alerted to anyway, because Yaxley would have said that. I'm pretty sure it's Yaxley who catches it. It is in the movie, but...
We'll see which one it is, yeah.
But I guess either way, he's alerted to the fact that Grimmauld Place was where they're hiding, and now not where they're hiding.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting with Phineas being there, seeing what I'm assuming is Grimmauld Place getting completely ransacked.
Yeah, that'd be really, really frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it does, like... It's one of those things where there was... Obviously, plan A was for Harry to get the sword through the will. Plan B is we'll get it to him.
I don't know that it was even the plan to give Harry the sword through the will. I think Dumbledore was fully aware that that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's... The whole purpose of him putting it in the will was... Hey,
I wanted you to have
this is a thing you need. I think that's all he was trying to do. It was like, hey, like big pointing, light up fingers going like,
pay attention to this.
This is what you need.
Possibly.
Which is hilarious because that whole conversation, which I know I've already ranted on, and I know it's another Harry Rufus thing, but the whole conversation of Rufus being like, is this important? Does he think this can kill the heir of Slytherin? And Harry going, no, try poking him with a sword. When, yes!
I like how every time you bring up this point, you get more and more ridiculous.
I imagine that's the tone with which he did it.
Well, I just like the way this wrapped up nicely. You have the portrait. It overheard, and it is when that chapter happens, like, and when the kids are like, why is this here? And how you always, like, you have to go backwards and be like, okay, so when did Phineas hear where they were? And it's like, oh, right there when she was, like, closing her purse. Oh, yeah, it's tiny, but it's really smart.
I just love how Phineas Nigellus becomes such an important, essential plot point.
Yeah.
Like, one... Out of all of the previous headmasters and headmistresses, he seems like the least likely to help in any way, shape, or form.
He's the headmaster in Hogwarts Legacy, right? Like, and he's not liked at all. It's almost like his legacy is bigger in his portrait than in his real self.
100%. I mean, well, there's a lot to his legacy because he is a prominent member of the Black family and all of that, and there's a lot to that. But yeah, he's a headmaster in the game. Spoiler alert. Not well liked, not really great at leading, at least in the game. But even when we've seen him in the series, he seems very, like, anti-student.
Very much so.
He seems very just anti pretty much anything that is not a headmaster thought.
Yeah.
Like,
the headmaster thought he would have had.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
So he seems very dismissive of almost everything. So the idea that he becomes a very crucial asset to be had in a positive way for our trio is really amazing to see. It's a very interesting character arc.
Yeah.
If a portrait can have a character arc.
Well, this one does. I am excited for that next chapter because now that we're in the ministry and now all three of us are going to get separated and it's like, well, shoot, now what do? We only have an hour.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you did so much planning for the things that you can roughly control. But, and again, you can't plan for curveball variety of just how life unfolds.
Yeah, but there was just zero discussion of, like, if this doesn't work exactly the way we want it to, how do we pivot?
I could see them I could see Harry or Hermione being like, I don't want to hear the negativity. This is going to go well. Everything's going to be fine. Like, Hermione, I could see
I could see it more being Ron saying that. Ron being like, everything's going to be fine. Hermione being like, we have to think of every single little example of
honestly,
what could go wrong.
Honestly, if I'm being like 100% honest here, I think Ron's the one pointing out the flaws.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't.
I think, because Ron, I think this might be one of the first times I'm really giving Ron a lot of credit on this podcast. And I realize we're like deep into book 7 at this point. But no, I think Ron would be the one pointing out some of the flaws because he's hearing all of this planning, whatever. And I could see him just being like the dumb answer of like, well, have you thought of this? It's like, well, wait, that could be a problem. Like, for example, like the maintenance robes.
Yeah.
Like, he just throws out like, well, you do know this, right? And they're like, no.
Well, see, that's why I think the exact opposite. I think he would see maybe some flaws, but not think to say them. And I think he'd be like, oh, it will be fine. It'll be good. Things always work out for us. Hermione, I think, would be the one who's like, I have to think of every... It reminds me of, like, Anxiety in Inside Out 2, where it's like you have every little scenario playing out. And then Harry would just be like, let's just do it.
Well, no. So Hermione is the planner, obviously. And I think Harry and Ron take a more pragmatic approach to things because they don't plan. So they just look at the thing as it is. The problem is Harry's not in the magical world nearly as much. He gets isolated away from the magical world, so he's not seeing maybe some flaws that are there, but it's just over his head because he doesn't see that. He doesn't think that way. Ron, chill, really pragmatic, but he's based in the magical world. So he can maybe see some flaws that are like, hey, that might be an issue because this is how this is going.
I would just also see him as like assuming that the others know those flaws because he knows those flaws. So if they don't point it out, well, I guess that means it's not an issue.
I don't know. I give Ron more credit. I give Ron more credit here. But regardless, this foray into the Ministry of Magic is going to go poorly. And there are going to be curveballs. There's going to be a lot of obstacles thrown at our trio, and it's going to be a really interesting chapter to tackle next week.
Yeah.
So please join us again next week for that. And as always, share the podcast, spread the podcast, give us a 5-star review, participate in the polls that we have on our social media. You can find our social media at HogwartsAPod. Look us up on YouTube. All of the things. Look us up on all of the things. And we thank you for sharing all of your thoughts with us. It gives us a lot more to talk about and read, and we love that. Thank you so much. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.